Welcome to The Bunk, your source of fact-checking information from the mainstream media to your auntie's Facebook ramblings. I'll be your host, James, and your host, Lucy, is right here.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Is it? It is afternoon, yes. Well, I guess it depends on when people are listening. Good whatever time it is where
Good
you are.
day.
Good 2 o'clock in the morning, you insomniac. Right, we are back after an unscheduled hiatus. Lucy and I had things to do.
Life happened.
Yeah, it just cut out. I'll just have to keep an eye on it. Maybe there was a...
Is it just electrical contacts?
Maybe the USB cut out. I don't know. I'll just have to be careful. This computer...
It's duct taped together.
It is. It is duct taped together. The screws that hold it together fell out. Look, the computer itself, all the electronics are fantastic. Can't fault it. A couple of years later, it cost me like $500 or $600. A few years later, it still runs perfectly speedily. I don't have any problems booting stuff up. I should probably remove some programs to kind of reduce the load on it. But no, it works really, really well. The chassis, the case that it is contained within, totally different story. So all the screws fell out. I don't know where they are. I can't use Loctite because I've opened it up and the bits where the screws screw into are broken. So
duct tape it is.
Duct tape it is. And look, I have what's called a Road Warrior setup, so I can work wherever I am. I just log into my home-based server and I can do whatever and everything gets saved and I can get secure connections wherever I am.
How's your Raspberry Pi going?
It's going fantastic.
Yeah?
It works really well, except...
I tried to visit the website the other day and I couldn't get in.
Yes. So what happened there? Was this last week?
Yeah.
Last week, couple of weeks ago. So what happened? A few things happened, actually. First of all, so we've kind of been on this unscheduled hiatus. I had to go and do some work to earn a little bit of extra money because I was getting a bit behind on a few things. I also had a trip to Sydney to Skepticon scheduled, which I'll get to later. So I had to take a bit of a break to amass some wealth, just do some handyman work around here and there. So look, if you love this show and you love what it does, go to patreon.com/thebunk, make some donations. I won't have to worry about that anymore. Right, so we kind of had to take a bit of a break, and in that time, I just kind of forgot about the technical details. I mean, the podcast was always in my mind, and I was always thinking, okay, so what's happening in the future? Where's this going? How do we get around this? But in terms of maintaining the website, in terms of maintaining the server, I just kind of went, everything's great. It'll do its own thing. Now, the TLS certificate, which is when you get a website and it says this site is secure, you need a certificate on your web page to verify that it's the correct page and everything like that.
Yeah.
I have it set to a really high security level, and the reason for that is that there are some things that I do on the website. I've got my own
cloud.
I've got my own cloud server, and there's also the logging in to post to the web page and stuff like that. And I want those things secure, and sometimes I access it outside on less than secure sites. So I have the security settings set to maximum. So if the secure certificate isn't valid, it just will not let you log onto the website at all. And that expired, which I thought it was good for a year. Turns out it was only good for 3 months. So I've learnt that lesson. And I didn't realize it was like that for a couple of weeks, and I didn't even realize it.
Oh.
So
I should have told you when the website was down. I was like, oh, maybe it's my connection. I'll come back later.
So that got fixed up, but there was another problem. So the server runs on Linux, and Linux has a little thing, you go uptime, and it tells you how long the system's been live for.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I wonder how long I can keep this going live for, which turns out it was around 80, 90 days. I had it running live for. Unfortunately, in that 80, 90 days, a few configuration files had been reset to the original configuration, which caused some problems to build up and compound. And I ran into a very small minor problem. But behind the scenes, wouldn't have affected the website at all. It was a small minor problem that affected how things ran behind the scenes. So I tried to fix it. It wouldn't work. So I thought, okay, I'll just reboot the server. And then all hell broke loose. Now, I was actually out of town at the time.
Yeah.
I was down the coast for a few days, so I couldn't even look at it until I got back home. This happened on a Monday. I didn't get back home until a Wednesday, and then I had to quickly go pick up a friend from the airport, drive her out of town, and then back. We got back at like midnight.
Wow.
And then next morning, spend the day with my friend who's from Sydney,
Mm-hmm.
and then drive her back to the airport. And then Friday, fly down to Skepticon. So Thursday morning, I had a moment to myself, and I just checked something, and I realized that this was a massive problem that I wasn't going to be able to fix easily. So it turns out that everything had broken. The computer wouldn't talk to anything outside of itself. I tried a few things here and there. In the end, I went nuclear option and just restored from an old backup file, which turned out to be a little bit more complicated than I initially thought, but it does work.
Excellent. Always check your backup.
You always check your backup, which I didn't do, and I'd been really slack with the backups, and the last 2 episodes that I posted had gone missing.
Oh no.
So
You can download them from...
So the audio file thankfully is stored at Libsyn, but also I keep a copy of the postings as well at Libsyn. So that actually only took about half an hour to fix. So I just had to repost and check a couple of things, and we were all good for that. So yeah, a few weeks. There was mostly it wouldn't let you in because of the certificate, and then there was a week where it just wouldn't connect at all because the server was snafu.
Having a sad.
Having is sad, but it's all good now. It's all up and running. We're all back up and running. So forward and onward, and so upwards. I have another SD card, which is sadly a different size to the one that I use in there. So you look behind you, the thing's all pulled apart because I'm trying to figure out how to get the file system to transfer to a smaller card. It'll fit, but it won't. I can't do a clone because they're different sizes. It causes an error.
Oh.
So I just need to figure out how to copy the files over so that I can get it all to work. So once I get that working in the future, if I have the same problem, I just pull out the card that's in there, insert the backup card. Everything's running until I can get the full card up and running again. Barely skip a beat, maybe a couple of hours offline. Unless I'm out of town when it happens, but...
Well, hopefully at the time you're not going to get smashed by request and, people wanting to download.
Well, see, that was a problem. I was going down to Skepticon and I needed the system up and running, and I had nothing. I couldn't even log onto my VPN.
Everyone, look what I've been doing.
Error. So as I said, I went down to Skepticon in Sydney. It was a fantastic weekend of talks and rubbing shoulders with some of Australia's, some of the world's greatest skeptics, actually.
Skeptics. All right, you have to tell me more.
So the skeptical community is basically about skeptical thinking and taking a step back from everything you from everything you see, everything you read, and questioning it, and basically using logic and
this is not conspiracy theory like who killed JFK type skeptics, is it? UFOs?
Well, it depends on how you define conspiracy theory. Conspiracies do happen, but rarely, and they also are not as big and crazy as people seem to think. I mean, the general rule of conspiracies is the bigger it is, the harder it is to keep.
Yep, like the landing on the moon.
To fake the moon landing would take a lot of people. Thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people
being in on this cover-up.
You have all of the people who worked on the Apollo program, all the people that worked on the Saturn program, all of the people around the world, such as Australia. Where was that place?
The Dish.
Yeah.
The parks.
Right, so basically that place.
Yep.
You got all the people down there who worked on that would need to be in on it. And every single astronomer ever since who has ever pointed a laser at the moon and gotten a response back from the retroreflector that they left on the moon would also need to be in on it.
Yep. Wow.
You know about the retroreflector?
No.
So I can't remember. I don't think it was Apollo 11, but one of the lunar missions.
After the first moon landing.
After the first moon landing, they left a retroreflector on the moon.
Okay.
The retroreflector is a special kind of mirror. You'll see these cars have them on the backs of them for the reflectors.
Yep.
That they reflect light back in the direction from which it came. So a normal mirror, if you shine a light at a 45 incident angle, it'll bounce off in the other direction at a 45-degree incident angle. Whereas if you shine a light at a retroreflector at a 45 incident angle, it'll come straight back at you.
Okay, yep.
So you don't have to be directly spot on with the retroreflector to get a signal back.
How big is this retroreflector?
I have no idea.
Because it's kind of hard to point at a small piece of something on the moon
Mm-hmm.
and get a reflection. From
It'd be a decent size, but it's not massive. So these extremely powerful lasers that they have at these observatories, these are sorts of things that would blind you instantly and probably burn a hole through your head. Not just your retinas, like clean through your head. But these extremely powerful lasers that they have at the astronomy that have to get to the moon through all of the refraction, the atmospheric refractions in our atmosphere and to the moon and back, they typically only get a few photons back.
Wow.
So extremely sensitive detectors.
Yeah.
And yeah, even though they're lasers, you're going to get some light scattering on the way. Well, some light dispersion on the way and also scattering from the atmosphere and interstellar dust and
divergence and reflectivity.
All of that fun stuff. So you typically only get a few photons back. The whole point of this is to determine how far the moon away is and map lunar distances. And this is how they know that the moon is leaving the Earth at some ridiculously...
Yeah, it's not crashing into Earth.
I saw an article where someone apparently is claiming that it's crashing into Earth. There was actually one that I'm going to. Future story.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure the moon is leaving very, very slowly, like a centimeter every 4 years or something like that. Do not quote those numbers. We're not going to miss it anytime soon, that's for sure.
So about Skepticon, tell me more about it.
Right, so yeah, it was apparently I heard from someone that it's actually, as of now, the largest skeptical meeting in the world that has happened. We had hundreds, if not thousands, of people come through.
Wow.
I don't know the exact numbers, but there were quite a lot of people there. It was a 2-day event.
Yep.
Notwithstanding the meeting, the warm-up drinks that we had on the Friday night. And like we had some amazing guest speakers. So we had a guest speaker, probably the one that really resonated with me most was Cara Santa Maria. I don't know if you know about her. She's a science communicator. Amazing, amazing person. She does a lot of things. She runs different podcasts, Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. Yep, Nerd Speak is one that she does, and Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. If you are a woman who is into science, get behind her and tell her how much you love her, because it was an interesting comment that she made.
Is that what you said to her?
No, she said to me, a large majority of her audience are young single fathers.
Really?
The majority of people who respond, I mean, she loves that she gets all this support. But yeah, she said that she wants to see more say hi to us. So if you're a female and you're into science,
yep,
tweet at Cara Santa Maria, tell her how much you love her work. So Cara did a speech called Science Communication in Post-Truth America, which is relevant to us partly because a lot of our information comes from America, a lot of our science information comes from America, but also because we also live in a post-truth society. We're all on social media. We're all seeing all this stuff. We're all seeing... one thing that she went into actually is the evolving meaning of the term fake news, which Donald Trump has kind of changed from being actual fake news to news I don't like. Anything that I don't like and disagree with is fake news. But she went on to talking about, what can you do as what can I do as a person to combat this? And there are a few things that she went through. She went through a list. I'm really hoping it goes up online so I can watch it again. I've just got a few key points here, but one of them was DIY media, so talking about podcasts and YouTube channels and stuff like that. And I went, that's me. So she really encouraged people to get out there and do podcasts. And I kind of got a bit of a double hit out of that, because one was, yes, this is something that they're saying, get out there and do this because it really makes a difference. But then I also realized that she's making a difference, that she's making a difference to the world by doing what she does.
Yep.
And that's where I want to be.
Yep.
I want to be where she is. And I've always wanted to make a difference. I always wanted to get into research so that I can make a difference through research and stuff, and yeah, make a difference through research. But just to see the difference that this person is making with science communication and her science podcast and her skeptical work, and just kind of thought this is something that is actually extremely valuable to the planet, and not in just getting people excited about science so that they can become scientists, but also getting people in business.
Understand what scientists do.
We need more people like Elon Musk. We need more people like him who are excited about science and have the money behind them and are just excited to throw money at a project, whether or not it comes out as it produces anything.
Yeah, I think the first step is actually to be able to communicate what we do as scientists. Often, no one knows what scientists do, and as a result, they devalue it, and fundings get cut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, scientists are terrible communicators.
Yeah,
in terms of to the public. I mean, we have our own language that we speak to each other with that you'll see on papers. But when it comes to communicating to the general public, that tends to get a little bit lost in language. People don't understand certainty or uncertainty, and scientists hate being certain about anything.
Yep.
We hate talking in absolutes, whereas laymen, conspiracy theorists, people like that they always talk in absolutes. When you come across someone who seems so certain about something, and yes, this is true, and scientists come along and say, I'm 99.999% sure that this is true. And they go, so you're saying this is absolutely true? And they're like that 0.0001% kicks in your brain and goes, well, there is a small percentage chance that I'm wrong. And
scientists admit they're wrong.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. Scientists admit that they don't know. I'm a little bit uncertain about facts, you know. Are vaccines harmful? Well, mostly not. Scientists admit that vaccines cause harm. Yeah, I guess if you go to vaccinate someone and you prick a nerve, that could be a vaccine injury.
Or someone could just pass out by the side of needles because that just makes them queasy. They faint on the floor and they split their face open.
Exactly. Vaccine injury.
Not talking from personal experience or anything.
Really? We need to talk about this later.
No.
Off air. I need to know this story. So when scientists talk in uncertainties, and you know, we like to take every tiny little detail. And when scientists talk in uncertainty, this is where you get this room for people to sort of sneak in and try and it's this tiny little crack, and they want to spread it open wider. And this is something that I don't think that scientists need to stop doing that. I think we need to communicate the value of doing that more. So yeah, we need to communicate better, and it's through people like Cara Santa Maria and Dr. Carl and Bill Nye that we do this, and the work of these people is a lot more valuable than just getting children excited about being scientists. It's getting the business people excited about science. It's getting the people with money, getting the politicians excited about science. That's why I actually tweeted at her, well, tweet mentioned her, and I said that I knew I wanted to see her speech. I didn't know how much I needed to hear her speech. It really did mean a lot to me. But apart from that, we had some amazing speeches. We had Dr. Carl, who I missed his original speech, but there was a podcast with the herd mentality afterwards.
He's fascinating. He's such a good speech deliverer.
The funniest thing was we had some American guests over, some speakers from America, and I actually heard on one of their podcasts someone talking about Dr. Carl and sort of saying, we're having a talk by Dr. Carl, who, and this always happens when you're talking to Americans about Dr. Carl, he's just like Australia's version of Bill Nye.
Okay.
So I was very conscious about that when I looked over and saw some of our American guests in the audience. And there's a line, you can hear it on the herd mentality, so I don't have any problems repeating this, where he was talking about his hippie days. And he said, and I will not confirm or deny that I tried to smoke my entire body weight in marijuana. And I'm thinking, this is Australia's Bill Nye. Represent. So we had also talk by Lee Nicholson, who I'd love to get in contact with. Lee, if you're listening, call me. She's a cancer researcher and also does a lot of speeches around about cancer research and how it works and how we look at cancer research, how the public views cancer research and why there'll never be a cure for cancer and all of where this leaves room for, as I said, conspiracy theorists to get in and all health nuts to get in and make these wild claims that are just totally untrue. And it wasn't just science. We had a speech by Sarah Hayter, who talked about getting out of Islam and some of the challenges involved in that. She's originally from Pakistan.
Wow.
Which Pakistan is rather eclectic, and you get some areas where it's fairly moderate, and then you get areas which are basically controlled by the Taliban.
Yep.
So, but she talked about that.
That's going to be a tough journey because it's not just leaving a religion; it's leaving your culture, family, tradition.
And this is the problem with these sorts of absolutist religions. I mean, in some areas of Islam are like that. There's a lot of Christian cults like that as well, like Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, where you're
kicked out
shunned.
of society.
You get kicked out of society, and it's something. I listen to a lot of skeptical podcasts. One of them is The Thinking Atheist.
Yeah.
If you've never heard Seth Andrews, he's one of the most beautiful people on the planet. I highly recommend that people listen to him because he's ex-radio. He used to work in Christian radio until his journey into atheism. So he has this sympathy for religious people, and he's just a really nice person, very amicable to speak to, and he gets a lot of people coming on and talking about their journeys out of different religions, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Islam, Church of Scientology.
Mm-hmm.
And it is heartbreaking when you hear people's stories and the pain that they have experienced getting out of their religions and being shunned by their family and not being able to speak to their family. And
it's like restarting your whole social circle all over again.
And a lot of them come out into society very unprepared for society that they live in and very confused about how to exist in this world. And it can be very heartbreaking listening to their stories, and particularly some of them who don't. They've all at some point have had to accept the loss of their family, but they also, you hear from some of them talking about they still love their family and they still miss their family. And there's that sort of melancholy, I miss them. And I would just have anything for them to walk through the door and give me a hug. So there was also a speech by Ruth Ellison, who was part of a cult. I can't remember the name of it.
Well, you think about all the suffering and you wonder, was it worth it? Or should they have just sucked it up and suffer?
That comes down to a matter of identity. And a lot of these people do. A lot of people in religions do. There's a lot of people even in not so cultist sects of Christianity there's a lot of priests who are non-believers. And this is their job. This is their entire job. They grew up, they went to ministry school to become ministers. They have families to support. They have to support themselves. This is all they know. This is their community. This is their job. This is their livelihood.
And they're supposed to be able to lead people through their spiritual journey and be there for them and guide them through it when they themselves are lost.
Mm-hmm. And this is another thing you hear on The Thinking Atheist. There was even one episode, I can't remember which one it is, where he actually had a current priest on there talking about his experiences being a priest, being a minister, where he feels like a hypocrite, leading these people in a religion that he doesn't believe in, but what else can he do? There are support groups out there for priests who are leaving their religion. So it's a very, very tough.
Yeah.
So yeah, this Ruth Ellison, I can't remember the name of the cult that she came from, I'm sorry. But she had to get out of it, and she had that experience, and this was a really insular cult, and she flew. They're from Perth. She now lives on the East Coast somewhere, and this was the first time she's spoken publicly about it as well, and it was really, really heartbreaking to listen to her speech. She cried, broke down on stage. So this is also what we do in the skeptical community, is look after people who have escaped these things. I mean, another speech by a woman who came out from being a naturopath and a homeopath.
Oh, wow.
And giving those sorts of people support. And you'd be surprised the kind of vitriol that these people get when they leave these communities.
Mm.
And they're treated as traitors. They get all sorts of hate mail come in, particularly when they speak out against it. So, so we had that. It wasn't all doom and gloom though. We did have some comedy. We had some speeches by Captain Disillusion, who finds viral videos on YouTube and explains how they're set up.
Ah.
So special effects that are in videos.
Yep.
So I'm sure that I will be speaking to him at some point in the future. I definitely will be wanting to get in contact with him and talk about some things. We had podcasts by Cognitive Dissonance and The Scathing Atheist, who did actually, they were billed as a Scathing Atheist, but they did another one of their shows called God Awful Movies.
Yeah.
So they reviewed a movie called 10 Facts in the Bible by Ray Comfort. Hilarious episode. Their podcast, their live podcast will be up. And also the two of them have another podcast together called Citation Needed. And they did a live episode on that on Ned Kelly, which was absolutely side-splittingly hilarious.
Oh, wow.
I never realized.
I'd love to hear that.
You have to listen to the podcast.
I want to.
You have to listen to the podcast. It's hilarious. I won't give any spoilers, but I would recommend anyone out there who's not already a Citation Needed listener to go subscribe to Citation Needed and listen to the Ned Kelly podcast. And I was totally honored to be amongst the audience of the very first live show of Citation Needed. So that is also a very... So I also got to meet a lot of these people down there as well. I got to shake hands with Cara Santa Maria. Didn't get to speak to her as much as I wanted to, but I mean, it was super busy weekend. I was run off my feet.
Yeah.
Running back and forth, meeting all of these people, and a huge shout out as well to all of my new listeners that I ran into down there. And most of them,
you met your listeners?
I met new listeners.
Okay.
As in, I put people onto the podcast.
Oh, right.
No one came up to me and was like, "I'm a huge fan of the show." I'm
shocked.
I've had a couple of people tell me afterwards that they're now fans of the show.
Oh, really?
Yes. But a lot of people gave me some great advice. I had a really great talk with a couple of the podcasters that were down there as well, who had established podcasts. And well, one of them asked me on the way out, so what have you learned? Have you picked up anything from this weekend? I'm like, my head is still buzzing. And also I was probably a little bit tipsy as well. It was that kind of weekend. But I didn't really have time to process it until I got home. I still haven't gone through all my notes. I've got pages and pages and pages of scrawled notes that I wrote as well during the speeches, during conversations that I had with people. Yeah. But yes, Alvin, if you're listening, I did pick up. I have thought about things, and I do have some changes lined up. Most of them behind the scenes, so they won't be too obvious.
Yeah.
But kind of just different directions that I want to take the show in. Slightly different directions that I want to take the show in, and the way I want to focus the show and stuff like that. So, I mean, this is the 6th episode, so it's still, I think it's been different from episode to episode anyway, so.
Yeah.
But we're slowly zoning in on a format. So, but yeah, it was an amazing weekend. A lot of fun had by all. I've heard a lot by some of the international guests about how much fun they had while they were down there. And hopefully out of this, I will get some experts as well that I can contact and talk to about different aspects, different things that it's good. It's always good to talk to experts.
They miss a number of missed days of school. If the unvaccinated kids miss 5 days of school and the vaccinated kids miss 27 days of school, well, it's primarily because the unvaccinated kids, you could interpret that to say that the unvaccinated kids are healthier.
But you missed the entire 3rd grade and you're unvaccinated.
I was sick, and it was good. Yeah, so maybe I'm not a scientific researcher. I don't know how to set all those things up.
All right, so I found a new source of information. Or I found a fantastic new source of stories.
New source of stories.
A new source of stories is a Facebook group I subscribe to, and they are nuts. So here's one that I picked out from that little community. India throws out Gates Foundation due to conflicts of interest with Big Pharma. So apparently,
Pharma being pharmaceuticals, not
Pharma-
farmers and crop growers.
yeah, not because now there's like Big Pharma, like there's one called Big Pharma, is it? That you keep linking me to about farms.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's big.
I've unfollowed them because they drive me nuts. I'm like, I don't have time to be so angry.
You've got big angry. That's what this podcast is about. Save it for the podcast. So they're trying to claim here that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which does a lot of work with vaccines in third world countries, has been kicked out of India because they're in bed with Big Pharma.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Do you want the truth? You do want their claims first.
Oh, yeah, give me the claims.
Give you the claims.
What do they claim happened?
There are so many people in the US that look to Bill Gates as a humanitarian who endeavors to save the world from hunger and disease. However, India has asked him and his foundation to leave their country, and here's the reason for that. National Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation of India, known as NTAGI, is known. National Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation of India is known as NTAGI. Earlier, they declared that they would cut ties with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now, actually, you know what? I'm going to stop this here because already this article is taking a sidestep. So what they're actually doing in this article, they're putting several stories together to make them look linked.
Yeah.
And the idea of this is to try and demonize the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to make them look like this evil New World Order organization that experiments on young children. So already we haven't even really got to the meat of the story yet, and they're already doing this.
Yeah.
So red flags all round. Well, apart from the fact that this comes from a site called inhalepositivevibes.com. Not exactly a valid sounding website.
You know how to pick them.
So we've talked about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation being asked to leave India. Actually, this is already wrong. So the Indian government has, and we'll get to why, but they have reduced ties with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And because this article hasn't even got to that yet, I won't even bother refuting that point. So the article goes on. It says the statement came after several reports which say that vaccine campaigns were carried out on thousands of young Indian children between 2009 and 2010 in order to fight against cervical cancer, and that they were in fact masked vaccine trials, which included 2 deeply controversial vaccines that are known to injure and kill. So many things wrong in that statement. So later on in the article, they kind of go into this. I'll bring it up now. What they're referring to when they're talking about the masked vaccine trials was a vaccination campaign, as I said, between 2009 and 2010 with Indian girls to vaccinate them against the human papillomavirus. Well, it's actually several strains of the human papillomavirus known to cause several varieties of cancer, most notably cervical cancer. I think it's like 96% of cervical cancers are caused by human papillomavirus. So we're pretty much wiping out.
Needed. You know this?
I will bring this citation out. I have an article somewhere. It might even be more than that. But we are effectively wiping out cervical cancer.
Yeah.
Not entirely, because there are still other causes of cervical cancer. But we are wiping out the vast majority of cervical cancers to the point where, and it may even reduce the risk of cervical cancer to the point where regular pap smears are no longer seen as necessary or worth doing on a risk-benefit analysis. So imagine that. This campaign was carried out on these Indian girls. Now, this is what the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation does. They give vaccines to people in third world countries who are too poor to afford the vaccines for themselves.
Yeah.
And what's happened is there's these claims come out by an independent organization, independent women's rights organization in India called SAMA, who have accused the government of carrying out vaccine trials. And the reason for this is they originally brought up the claim, and then they filed that they were told that no, it's just a vaccination campaign. And then they did a freedom of information request, and the wording in the trial refers to a phase 4 clinical trial.
Yep.
So there is actually an ethical question there as to whether or not the parents of these children were informed that they were part of a clinical trial.
Mm-hmm.
However, this needs to be put in context. Later on in the article, they claim that the girls were being treated as guinea pigs, which is totally not right. So keep in mind that this claim, I actually have the claim here. So Feinberg, they're talking about Mark Feinberg of Merck, states that the India projects are not clinical trials but studies to facilitate speedier access to a vaccine in the country. The Drug Controller General of India, in a response to an application under the Right to Information Act, has described the project as involving Phase 4 studies as per Schedule Y of the Drugs and Cosmetics Acts in the rules thereunder. Keeping in mind that this is a Phase 4 clinical trial, this is from Australian Clinical Trials talking about the different phases of clinical trials. Now, this is universal. This is what these phases mean. So phase 1 of a clinical trial. Now, clinical trials occur after the laboratory test. So we're talking after the test tubes, after the animal test. This is where we get onto human clinical trials.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those tests have been done. We already have a fairly idea of how effective the vaccine is and how safe the vaccine is.
Mm-hmm.
So phase 1 clinical trial is done in a small group of people, so 20 to 80 people, and this is done to evaluate safety. So are we going to see any adverse side effects to determine safe dosage ranges, that kind of thing. Then we have a phase 2 clinical trial, which again is done for safety reasons, and where this involves several hundred people. Also done to determine efficacy.
Mm-hmm.
So does the vaccine work? Do we see a repeat of the efficacy that we see in animal trials? Then we have a phase 3 trial, which is done on several hundred to several thousands. So this is done to determine, we're still looking at long-term safety, efficacy, indications and contraindications. So when do we apply the vaccine? When is it justified? When do we say don't apply the vaccine? So the vaccine may not be effective under certain conditions.
Mm-hmm.
The vaccine may cause adverse effects under certain conditions if you're on certain medications.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the flu vaccine is contraindicated if you have been sick in the last few weeks. So
really,
that's an example of what you get out of these phase 3 clinical trials. Now, phase 4 clinical trials, which is what the allegation is here, phase 4 clinical trials are actually done in parallel to the rollout of the vaccine
mm-hmm.
or drug,
Yep.
any pharmaceutical preparation. Phase 4 clinical trials are done in parallel to the rollout. So what they do at the phase 4 clinical trial is the drug's already out there. The drug's already approved, or the preparation, I shouldn't say drug, because vaccines aren't drugs.
Yep.
So I don't want to conflate those two. So I'll call it the preparation.
Mm-hmm.
The preparations have been approved. They're out there in the general public. So the point of a phase 4 clinical trial is then you follow up on some of those patients.
Mm-hmm.
So you make sure that, so these trials involve thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and they go for decades.
Yep.
There was a phase 4 trial done on the original monovalent measles vaccine in the 60s
Mm-hmm.
that was still running in the 80s and 90s.
Yep.
So they were still following these people decades after to see
long-term effects.
long-term effects, long-term efficacy.
Yep.
Maybe if 20 years down the track they start noticing HPV infections back on the rise, they know that they need a booster after 20 years.
Yep.
This is what phase 4 clinical trials are done. So this is far from using someone as a guinea pig.
Yeah, it's already clinical role or commercialized at this point.
At this stage, it's out there.
Yep.
So a phase 4 clinical trial is a follow-up study
Yep.
on people who are part of the patient population.
Mm-hmm.
You may, when you go to get to be administered a new drug or a new vaccine, you may be given the option of being part of the clinical trial. So do you consent to have your medical information put on file? Do you consent to be called, followed up?
Yep.
And you can drop out of these trials anytime you want. And again, this article made allegations that the girls were fingerprinted and ID'd. And I mean, this is what happens in a phase 4 clinical trial. This is what is needed so that they can identify you.
Mm.
Now, the controversy over this phase 4 clinical trial is, were the children given
The correct consent.
were their parents given informed consent?
Yeah.
Meaning, were they told what was happening, or were they sort of, was this all done under the table, not really telling the parents what's going on properly? I'm not really going to comment on that. It's totally irrelevant to what this article is about, because they're trying to paint the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as conducting these sort of Nazi experiments on these children, when, you know, phase 4 clinical trials are perfectly normal for pharmaceutical preparations that have already been approved and released into the general public. All we need to know here is the context under which the controversy is, and that is that, were the parents of these children given the proper information that their children were going to be followed after the administration of the vaccine? It also says here that the vaccines that are known to injure and kill, citation needed. Give me a citation from this. The only trials that I've seen where they claim that the vaccine injure and kill are backed up by religious organizations who have a bee in their bonnet about Gardasil vaccines, because, I mean, there's no way to put it other than to be blunt, that they have a problem with women having sex without consequence. And it's only the women. They claim that the girls get all of these horrible conditions, totally unfounded, totally not supported by any evidence, other than by studies organized by heavily religious foundations. And so they have a problem with these vaccines going to women because, my God, women would be able to have sex without getting cancer. How are we going to scare them into being abstinent now? We must protect their purity. I'm a scientist. I'm willing to change my mind. Well, not change my mind. I'm willing to accept the fact if someone were to provide me with some credible evidence that these vaccinations are dangerous.
So what injuries and death are they referring to?
They talk about some in this article.
Okay.
But the implication is that they already had this information out there. Again, no credible studies to show this. Nothing published, nothing properly peer-reviewed. And look, I'm not going to automatically dismiss an article if it's just because it's from a journal I've never heard of. But I'll definitely look at it with a bit more of a skeptical eye and with a lot more scrutiny. And in these studies, a lot of it doesn't add up. We're talking about jumping to conclusions not supported by the evidence and totally unfounded claims. So the article continues. 2 controversial vaccines are the Gardasil by Merck & Co. and Cervarix by GlaxoSmithKline. The pharmaceutical companies claim that they protect against human papillomavirus, these people need to learn grammar, which is supposed connection to cervical cancer. That wording doesn't make sense. These types of vaccines have life-threatening side effects. Again, citation needed. So, Merck and GSK work together with the Gates Foundation to take advantage of India and to use their girls as human guinea pigs. Again, phase 4 clinical trial, not guinea pigs. So finally we actually get to, here they come back to Bill and Melinda Gates after running this sort of story off in a direction which is totally unrelated. This is not related to the original story of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation having their ties cut with the Indian government. So we come back. Economic and Political Weekly, which are the ones who headed the investigation, report the Gates Foundation ban on India is because of, quote, pressure from powerful international organizations, the promotional practices of drug companies, and the co-option of an uncritical endorsement by the medical associations of India are influencing the public health priorities of the country. Now, they've totally taken this out of context. However, I do agree with the Indian government's assessment. So coming back to reality for a second, I have gone back and looked at, I've read the articles. I do link the articles in here, hoping that no one reads them. So when you read the actual articles, the government is cutting back ties with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They are still working with Bill and Melinda Gates. They are still working with the pharmaceutical companies, but they're administering the vaccine programs by themselves.
Yep.
They are taking control by themselves of it, rather than allowing the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to conduct the vaccine campaigns in the country. And the reason for that is that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are involved with pharmaceutical companies. That's no secret, and there's no allegations here of corruption. However, the government does not want to be involved in a commercial sense with these organizations.
Yep.
So they're cutting ties back with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to protect their own interests,
Yep.
so that they are not being influenced by handouts from pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, there's no conflict of interest.
So it reduces conflict of interest with India. So the government has basically said, thanks guys, but we got this.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with them.
Mm.
Because the pharmaceutical companies are doing deals with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, obviously to provide free or lower priced vaccines so that the foundation can go out and vaccinate children in third world countries. So that is, in a sense, the government getting handouts from the vaccine companies. And the Indian government doesn't want that, and I totally agree with them. But it's not a case of, as the article is trying to imply, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation being thrown out of the country for being in evil cahoots with the evil pharmaceutical companies.
They're still partially funded. It's not a complete tie being cut. It's just partially cut.
That's what I was saying. They're partially cutting back ties.
Yeah.
But they're still working with the foundation because the foundation does good work.
Mm.
But they're scaling back and doing as little work as they can do while still getting some of the benefits of the foundation.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they have control of it.
Yeah.
They have control of how the program works. They have control of it, of actually administering the vaccines, who the vaccines go to. And they still have the option of any time of saying if a third party starts to develop the vaccines, they still have the option to say, okay, guys, sorry, we're now going to this other company because we're getting a better deal from them.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how a sovereign country works.
Yeah.
They are freeing themselves from commercial interests. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But again, I stress this is not a case of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation being thrown out of the country because of some hidden agenda. This is just the country distancing themselves from commercial interests.
Yeah.
Which I think all sovereign countries should do. So we have this description. An Indian non-government women's organisation called SAMA brought evidence to the authorities which are proving that young girls have been taken advantage of by the Gates Foundation, who illegally vaccinated toxic shocks into the small girls without proper consent or even full disclosure about what exactly was being done into the bodies of these girls. You know, I'm not going to... It is published as an article in The Lancet. This is from SAMA.
Mm-hmm.
It's more a letter to the editor.
Okay.
So this letter to the editor is really, as I said before, and I've read a little bit of it, it's an expression of concern as to whether or not the girls were properly informed of being part of a phase 4 clinical trial.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with being involved in a phase 4 clinical trial. It's not treating them as guinea pigs, but if your medical history is going to be tracked, you need to give consent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the concern is.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is totally relevant to the whole guts of the story, which is that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have had their funding cut back by the Indian government, or their involvement with the Indian government cut back.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're doing here is they're conflating these stories. They're making them look tied where they're not, to try and, as I said before, make out that the foundation is this evil, demonic organization which is injecting poor, innocent third world girls with toxic chemicals for God knows what reason. Besides giving them these dangerous vaccines, some of the girls had to submit copies of their fingerprints to the government authorities. Again, phase 4 clinical trials. This is a forced effort that further accuses the Gates Foundation for violating the human rights involving some of the most vulnerable members of the global population. So basically this article goes around in circles from here, so I don't think there's any point in reading this any further. Now this is something this was published, when was it? November 5, 2017. This is actually something that goes around in circles. It's actually been written, rewritten, and rewritten a few times, which is pretty typical of these bullshit articles. Now, there is a great article in PolitiFact about this, actually from December 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Anti-vaccination blog revives debunked HPV story. Now, they're actually talking here specifically, they mention the headline, Bill Gates uses 30,000 Indian girls as guinea pigs to test cancer vaccine. And they again talk about the fact that it's a phase 4 trial. But they do talk, I'll read this paragraph called No Deaths. And this is where they were talking in the article about some of the girls died. Now, bring up again, this is a phase 4 trial and involving 30,000 participants. And so that's a lot of people in a country where the life expectancy is not great,
Mm-hmm.
and they do tend to die of a lot
Other
of
causes.
things, other causes. Well, 30,000 people in any trial. I mean,
Any longitudinal tracking.
that's right. 30,000 people in any longitudinal study, you're going to see some things happen.
Yeah.
Even less than that. But that has to be determined by those conducting the study.
Yes, but everything needs to be recorded.
Yes. Everything does need to be recorded. It needs to be totally transparent.
Mm.
And unfortunately, these transparencies get exploited by people with their own agendas. So I'll read this paragraph. The government commissioned a group of physicians and researchers to investigate whether the vaccination program caused any deaths. In February 2011, the group reported that there was no connection. One girl drowned. Insecticide poisoning killed 2 others. 2 others had severe malaria. One was bitten by a poisonous snake, and one died from a disease that physicians said could not possibly be linked to HPV. No reputable study has ever tied the vaccine to a death. The vaccine can have side effects including fever, headache, fainting, and nausea. But according to many studies cited by the CDC, these pass quickly. Now, I mean, these symptoms are pretty much universal with vaccines. Fever, headache, fainting, and nausea.
Mm-hmm.
These are not the universal. Not everyone gets them, but every vaccine will have these side effects on some people because they're generic immune responses.
Yep.
And that's what you want from a vaccine. You want to elicit an immune response that will cause white blood cells to be produced that will attack that contain antibodies that will attack the pathogens.
Yep.
And in some people, their immune system goes into overdrive and they get the fever, headache, fainting, and nausea.
Yep.
But they do pass quickly. We're talking, hours to, at worst, a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever had a intramuscular vaccine and it feels like someone punched you in the arm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had that with tetanus once. God, that was painful.
Yeah. They tend to be, don't they?
Mm. So basically, we have, as usual, a little tiny bit of truth in this and a whole lot of bullshit. So, yeah, I didn't. Did you believe this at all?
No, but the article's well written.
Which article are you talking about?
The breathe healthy one.
Oh, really? I thought it was terribly written.
Well, it
I had red flags coming up everywhere.
Well, yeah, like the website itself is an easy giveaway, but reading that, it's not clear.
I don't know.
It's not clear on a few things, like the consent issue.
Yeah.
There was a section, possibly in the article, that they linked about them being taken to court over this ethical violation.
I don't know if they're taken to court. There were some hearings, and there's certainly, they're pulled up on it. I don't know what the response was, and at this stage, I don't really care. I mean, I do care, but in this context, it's totally irrelevant because, we've already established that this is total bullcrap and that the article has tried to paint, and this isn't even a case of the foundation being pulled up. This isn't even a case of the foundation being in any way disciplined. They're just saying, right, we got this.
Yeah.
What a country does. It's what the government's there for.
Mm.
And the government is working in the best interest of its people. I'm going to leave that there, and we're going to wrap this up today. We will be back next week with more content, more research content. Look, if you like what we do here and you would like to see more of it and you would like to see more reliable weekly content, get onto patreon.com/thebunk and leave a donation for every episode there. Or if you don't want to make a regular donation, you can go to our page and click on the PayPal link and make a one-off donation there. That would also help. And also what would be really great is some notoriety. So if you can spread the word, get the podcast out there, get your friends, family, and your rambling auntie to listen to it. And that way I can get more people on board as well. So when Lucy is not available because she's such a busy person,
Sorry.
saving the world, don't be sorry. I was just saying, saving the world. Don't be sorry for saving the world and curing cancer. She's curing cancer, people.
One photon at a time.
One photon at a time. So while she's busy doing that, I might occasionally need some help. So if you could spread the word, and I might be able to get some more people involved in this, and that would be fantastic regardless. So with that, I will leave you. We will see you again next week, and have a good evening, morning, night, whatever.
Chat to you soon.